Actually 6:31 p.m. This is a regular meeting for the month of November. The agenda was posted more than 24 hours in advance of the meeting as required. I would like to introduce myself, Darlene Mann, and the Budget Committee members present for tonight's meeting, who are Tom Enright, Brian Rader, Cindy Van Conant, who's walking in, Raul Blanchet, Matt McGuire, and Lauren Ridstrom. Dave Blinn has an excused absence this evening, and I'd like to also introduce our BA, Kelly Seeley. If you would all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'll ask if there are any agenda adjustments for this evening. The one thing we're going to shift a little bit, maybe our discussion of the capital improvement plan is going to shift a little bit to more of the bond proposal for FY23. And Kelly mentioned to me before this meeting that the kind of the 5-year view of our normal CIP would be available later. So we'll just kind of shift that discussion a little bit. I think that would have just evolved naturally based on the topics, but just wanted to point that out. So our meeting observer for this month is Cindy.
I did last month.
You did do last month. Okay, we're going to go to Raul. Oh, maybe you came late. Brian, you came later. Were you like a couple minutes late? And all right, Raul, you're going to be our process observer for tonight. Let me just make a note for next month. And we'll move on to the approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. We had held over the September 24th minutes because there were some changes that Raul had suggested, and Matt needed a chance to kind of get them in and get them disseminated. So at this time, I'll take a motion to approve the amended minutes of September 24th.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Raul, seconded by Lauren. Any questions, comments, concerns, issues, items to change? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the minutes from September 24th?
I think I was
Wait,
absent.
how many was that? Were you a yes, Raul?
Yes.
Lauren,
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I think I was
No's.
absent.
I think you might have been. So you're going to be an abstention?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0, 1 with Tom Enright abstaining. Moving on to the minutes of October 22nd. Those are also amended minutes. Dawn sent those out based on some recommendations that Raul had. So I'll take a motion to approve the amended minutes of October 22nd.
So moved.
By Lauren, seconded by Raul. Any questions, issues, comments, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor of the October 22nd minutes? Opposed? Abstained? Okay.
Wasn't there.
601 with Brian Rader abstaining. We will, seeing no public present, we can move right on past public input and move on to our normal business items, which include kind of just a budget review and discussion of the next round, which was 3.1. I sent a ton of information to everybody. I apologize for inundating you. But October, the end of October and early part of November are just, there's so much information that's shared. So prior to this meeting, I shared with you the tax rates for Brookline and Hollis, which have been finalized and are in everybody's tax bills. You can't see the specific co-op rate, but those are, I at least shared those sheets with you, as well as the adequacy aid calculations, enrollment information, and earlier today I shared a calendar and a quick summary of the prior information that I sent. So I think at this point I would like to just go through some of the information that I sent, and then we can talk and move into the next round of the budget. So when I sent out the calendar, I also sent out a quick summary of the enrollments, aid, and tax rate information that I gave out because it was a lot of information, and I'm not sure who was able to get through it all, but I just want, it's double-sided. And I just wanted to we'll talk about this in greater detail as we move toward the public hearing, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things. So for the estimates of our state aid, what we are seeing, if you'll recall, as we were finishing moving into this year, FY21, Brookline had received some additional aid that at this point is not continuing into the estimates for next year. Now, there is a legislative possibility that the state legislature might make some decisions about continuing that aid or addressing some of the components of adequacy, because one of the things that's significantly affecting adequacy aid in a lot of districts, I didn't notice it as much in our districts, but free and reduced price lunches are in a lot of districts, a huge component of the aid that they received. And in a lot of cases, because lunches are free, not as many families submitted their free and reduced price lunch information and paperwork. So that unfortunately affects the numbers that then get carried forward. I did look at ours for this district, and I think there was a 10% drop I think it might have been Brookline. But it was really, it wasn't really significant. The most significant thing impacting aid for us and for Brookline specifically is that drop of that additional disparity aid, which totaled $1.2 million for all of Brookline, and that gets shared between the co-op and the Brookline School District. So that's why Brookline's adequacy aid is it's the main component to why Brookline is seeing a 26% drop in the adequacy portion of their aid. Just quickly moving on to tax rates, I included where we were for FY20, where our estimates were when we presented the budget, and what we're anticipating as a result of the rates that were just set. So for the top part is the total tax rate, so it's a summary of what you would see in the sheets and the files I shared with you. And so you see for Hollis, we're going from 2310 to 2318, and for Brookline from 2987 down to 2780. And I did a quick calculation of where the co-op rates would end up, and we ended up lower than what we were estimating when we were presenting the budgets, and that's due in total to the amount of unreserved fund balance that we returned to each of the communities. So it was a significant amount to return and resulted in savings to each of the districts. What that then means is, while I don't have revenue estimates yet from Kelly, but what that means for the tax rate looking forward is that we are at a relatively low rate and have less state aid to contribute to the revenue side. So we're starting at a lower point than normal. It's going to make an increase due to the budget look bigger. So we still have to figure out what that is as we get to a final view of the budget, but there will be a greater increase because of where we're starting. And on the back side is a co-op enrollment summary. So what I did here is, what I noticed in looking at the NESDEC numbers is the trend I've seen year over year is that you would basically have the same slope to our movement of our enrollment. But every year when NESDEC comes out with a new view, the total number of students tends to get higher and higher and higher. So it kind of moves the same way, but it just has a bigger base. What I noticed this year is that there was a drop of like over time, a more significant number of students than I would have expected, and that we were kind of dropping consistently, which surprised me because I've just looking around Hollis, seeing the amount of building and construction that's going on, I was just really surprised, and I'm sure it's the same in Brookline. So that's why I included FY21, just to give you a sense of where NESDEC was estimating the view to be. So if we were looking at, we're in FY21 this year, if we went out 5 years, FY26 would have been a total of 1,252 students, and now this year's estimate has us 5 years out at 100 students less than that. So I just thought it was important to share because it really looks so different than the prior view. So but moving on from that, we're looking at an FY22 estimate of students of 1,201 from this year, which is 1,209, and the distribution between the two communities looks to be relative. Well, we have to use the prior year's distribution, so we'll use 46.3% and 53.7% for in the apportionment calculation, which is the FY21 amount, where we anticipate ending this year, and that's relatively consistent with how they're anticipating us starting FY22. Where we ended last year, though, was at 47.6. So that 1 and a little bit percent shift to Hollis, again, will have an impact on that. That's a big shift. Usually we see like 1/4 to 1/2% shift. So to see some distribution shift of over 1% is pretty significant. So I just wanted to point those things out. And again, those are things we'll talk about again as we approach the public hearing, but I just wanted to bring those things to your attention. So I'm happy to answer any questions now, or you can send them to me at any time. Okay. Go back to the agenda. So at this point, I think we can move over to round 3.1 of the budget. And I don't think I've ever said this before. With round 3.1 of the budget, the district has come in below guidance by $72,944. And my understanding is that there are still several areas that the district is considering and has to kind of work through as we get to the 4th round that we'll see in December. But Kelly, if you could maybe walk us through some of those changes into this view, I would appreciate that.
Sure. There really aren't any changes in the category of personnel, and in academics, we decided to drop the soprano sax. Probably something we can purchase this year. In new computers, we made an adjustment to the social studies numbers. We did buy Chromebooks a few years ago for social studies, some portion of them. So we were able to reduce the plan by a few Chromebooks and reduce that number. In the replacement computer equipment, we did not make any changes at this time. And neither did we in the shared services software section. In the safety issues section, we actually added fireproof filing cabinets for special ed records. And we'd probably be doing that in phases until we get up to the appropriate amount. And we did drop the EpiPens for the nurse's office. I believe we have a different funding source for that.
Do students bring in their like prescription? Do they?
Yes,
and
they do.
But these are like more emergency.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is an expiration date on them, and we do keep them for field trips and whatnot when, you know, the kids might not remember to bring them with them. So let's see, athletics remains the same. So then facilities and the maintenance trust, that is kind of where all the movement, or a lot of movement, has been made. So I don't know exactly how you want to do this. I don't want to jump ahead to the
That's okay.
To the placeholder for the bond, but we did remove some things because we're looking at an FY23 bond. But the two things that we feel like we really, really need to do are another roof section for the high school and the paving work that we started this summer. We want to continue that. The first responders in the town really would like us to widen the road that goes up around the high school, because it's a disaster if there's ever going to be an emergency that they need to get to a person or a fire or whatever. So the next section we do we'll start where we ended and start going up the hill. At that time, we'll try to widen that section. And then as we talk about the bond, we'll continue to do more with that concept in mind. So everything else in the high school, other than removing those two things and putting them in the maintenance trust, remains the same in the facilities maintenance section. And in the middle school, we took out the building systems evaluation, and I believe that you'll find in the bond with a little bit increased number. And then we, at one point, had the roof replacement for the middle school in there, but we've also put that in the placeholder for the bond. So that reduced that number by more than $100,000, taking those things out. And then if you just want to look at the warrant articles, we were able to reduce pretty significantly the operating budget numbers between the two views, 2.1 and 3.1, or 2.0 and 3.1. We also reduced the maintenance trust from $200,000 to $115,000, and again, the $115,000 represents the roof section and that paving piece. And then the athletic revolving fund, I've reduced it from $67,000 to $50,000. That's kind of what I'm estimating between what we collect from parents this year and what will be remaining in the athletic, the athletic trust. Those two numbers will combine for the funding source to start the revolving fund, the athletic revolving fund. And that will require a warrant article to establish the fund, and then we also have to specify how we will fund that fund that we're starting. And then it will just be treated after that like a food service transfer or the grants transfer.
Okay, and so we have to show the trust because we're going to establish it and say we're going to start it with a balance of $50,000?
Well, it's really not showing the trust, it's establishing the revolving fund.
Okay.
To look at that. So we have to have a warrant article that establishes it and explains how we will fund it.
Okay.
Because the funding, so the trust money will come into the general fund and fall to the unreserved fund balance. And then the revenue from the parents for this year will also fall to the unreserved fund balance. So the warrant article will need to be funded by unreserved fund balance.
Okay. And then after that, we wouldn't see this anymore?
Then you won't see a warrant article, but you'll see, just like you do for food service transfer and the grant transfer.
Right, just not a separate warrant article?
Yep,
Okay.
it'll be part of the budget at that point as a transfer.
Mm-hmm.
But it will be a separate fund, just like it is now.
Okay.
So that's pretty much, in a quick nutshell, how we got to the reduction in a below guidance number anyway, of 70,000 something.
Great. And then on the bottom of that new items page, there are some of the placeholder and starting items for an FY23 potential bond based on kind of the last part of our topics we talked about at last month's meeting, which was whether the budget committee, thought that was a good idea, and we kind of had indicated that it is. And so the superintendent and Kelly are looking toward FY23 because that allows enough planning time to identify which projects will be in there and things like that.
Right, because these numbers are really big, fat estimates right now. So.
So these will evolve, hopefully, get a better sense, like next month as you look toward that capital improvement plan, that was that 5-year view
Yes.
of all those projects. And usually in June, we do that whole facilities
which we didn't
overview and
do,
everything,
yeah.
which obviously didn't take place, but would anticipate you'd be doing something like that to develop this list over.
Absolutely, and now that we have a facilities director, yay.
Yeah,
that
I'm
will
looking
be-
at you, but it would be
Right,
his
it will be a big
responsibility.
help to get there, but I mean, I can't tell you that in December, these numbers will be closer because we have a lot of work to do, but I think, we'll be able to put that together as a package much better than we have right now.
So right now, it stands at least around a little over $1 million, so 1.1
Yes.
million with, we'll see what else.
Right, but that's an
Ends up being
estimate, because those
Yeah.
numbers could fluctuate either direction.
But at least it gives us a sense of, the remaining roof sections and kind of getting that all done in once instead of in phases.
Yep,
The listed as a main office security upgrade, continued road paving, building systems and energy evaluation, window replacement, and the middle school.
at the middle
roof
school, yes,
replacement.
sorry, that is the
I mean,
middle
I'm thinking the elevator would probably go in there.
It could, but, we continue to have discussions with the vendor, and it looks great. I mean, he's
Okay.
like, why do you want to replace it? Because they did a lot of work on it, and,
Okay.
it's kind of like one of those.
Okay, great. Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
I just have a quick question. You mentioned the fireproof file cabinets for special ed
Yes.
files.
Yes.
Is there any plan to digitize for future reference, future files, or?
Yes, we have started that, not necessarily with special ed records, but with other records, but it's an overwhelming task. We don't have a lot of bandwidth or personnel to approach that project.
So the historic files of previous records, or those are the ones you're storing, or the current records as well?
Storing in the filing cabinets, you're
Yeah.
saying? Yeah, those are mostly historical, and there's a certain number of years you have to keep them, and then you can dispose of them. So, do you want to digitize them since it's a limited number
Well,
of
right.
years? But,
But as long as moving forward, we're actually using modern means to save the
as far as the
files.
current records, I'm not sure that we do. I think we're using a document management company to store those. So I'm not sure we're digitizing them at this point. Again, it comes, we're going to have to hire someone that would be their job.
Is there an outside company that we could use to digitize the records?
We could. We'd have to put that in the budget, yeah.
Well, since you're already spending money on fireproof files, I guess you might as well get some use out of it
Well,
for a while.
right, exactly.
Okay. So Kelly, can you talk a little bit about what some of the other areas that will continue to be evaluated for round 4?
I can. I believe the personnel, there is very likely that we will reduce at least one of the shared positions that we have right now. We have a facilities position, a food service position, and a classroom substitute. And those are meant to be SAU-directed subs that on a given day, we need to send, the facilities person to Brookline, and we need to send the food service person to Hollis, and we need to send the guaranteed sub to the co-op, and that would be based on absences or medical leaves or whatever the case may be, because we're finding ourselves that it's harder and harder to find subs in a normal year, not to mention this year. So that's where this concept is coming from. Right now, we feel like the facilities substitute is really the most critical. And just as we did last year with the nurse, that was the most critical, and boy, did that work out well. So these positions are critical, but we understand that we probably can only ask for 1 or 2 a year. So I would expect one of those to go away. And then in academics, I think those are pretty set, except for the middle school social studies textbooks. We're waiting for the DOE to define what that curriculum looks like, and that's kind of tied in with that, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. So that is a likely candidate for a reduction. I think the new computer equipment, excuse me, is pretty solid, and I don't expect changes there. We may have some changes in replacement computer equipment in the area of Chromebooks, because there is an end of life to Chromebooks that we have discovered not long ago. So these are the ones that have an end of life. We did, however, get a number of Chromebooks through the CARES Act and a couple of other sources. So we need to evaluate, and they're all on back order. So we need to evaluate when all of those come in, and also look at Chromebooks that we've loaned out that don't come back, or Chromebooks that are damaged when they come back. So there's sort of an evaluation process that we need to look at here. But we may be able to reduce.
Is there any consideration given when people don't return the Chromebooks that there's some fee attributed to
Well,
that?
we may have to develop that. I think that from last spring, I really think we only had 1 or 2 families that did not return them. So I think we were very lucky. This year, we lent out more, so I would expect more issues. So we'll have to see how that develops as time goes on. We are currently getting some back that are damaged, so that's a whole nother issue that we will have to deal with families. Excuse me. I think that might be the end of what I can offer. There might be a couple of things in the facilities area that we might decide to move to that FY23 bond proposal, but I think it's pretty solid right now.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
Couple of
Darlene, do you
questions.
know, on those items that are placeholders for the bond, do you know what, if anything, we budgeted for each one of those items last year that was in the budget?
For like from the capital improvement plan?
Well, that was in the budget.
Hold on one second. I'd have to pull up last year's view.
I mean, did we have an item in the budget for the roof last year?
Yes.
Yeah.
How much was it?
I'll tell you in a minute.
We also
You don't have to
had,
do it now, but
while she's working on that, I can tell you that we did have a small number, I want to say maybe $15,000 for the middle school window replacement in this year's budget. Otherwise, I don't think any of those things were in there, except for the roof section.
Let's see.
I think it was 50,000.
So for FY21, for the, there were a lot of things.
I think it was 50,000.
Yeah, the roof section was 50,000. We had middle school roof repairs of 20,000. Wait, let me do the high school first. The high school had a $50,000 roof section, masonry repairs for 20,000, paving for 60, security camera upgrade for 22. And in the middle school, we had $20,000 of roof repairs, asbestos abatement for 54,000, additional tile where there was asbestos for 30,000, and middle school paving for 25,000. So all of that came to 281,575. And let me just do a quick little this. $229,000 of that 281 was funded but in the maintenance trust, and the remainder of those items, so that 40,000 was in the budget. And then there was another $160,000 of projects, probably 20 different projects spread throughout the middle school and high school. I could send everybody last year's capital improvement plan after the meeting, if that'll help.
So 229 came out of the maintenance.
No. I think the maintenance fund last year, those were the big ticket items. The maintenance fund last year we put 200,000 in, and I think we took out, there was, I feel like we took out more than we put in because there was a balance. Let me just,
Well, I know we left 50-ish in for the elevator to just as a
Right.
placeholder.
right, hold on one second, let me,
So what is the point you're bringing up?
Well, the point where I'm going is that if we took, just for the sake of argument, if we took $250,000 out of the budget, out of last year's budget for these items and put them in a bond this year, then in effect, and then we've got a flat budget, then in effect, we've got $250,000 of increased costs other places in the budget,
Right,
right?
right,
So I'm just trying to get an order of magnitude of what that is.
okay.
Because if we're doing a bond, the budget's,
But the bond
Not
will
really
be
flat.
a year from next.
right,
this
it's not
go-around,
going,
will
it's
be
not
next
going
one.
forward this year. It's for the next budget cycle.
right. But it's still, for our purposes on the budget committee, it's still dollars that are not.
One-time expenditures.
Pardon?
It's one-time expenditures. Isn't that what you're getting at?
Yeah. So we've taken those out of the budget.
Right. So the next year's budget in theory should be lower by that amount.
Should be $250,000 lower.
Right.
Okay. Or some number, I don't know what
Right.
number.
Okay, so last year, the maintenance trust, we put $200,000 into it, and we really spent $200,000. And that was on a roof section, the masonry work, the asbestos, roof repairs at the middle school, plumbing and air handling upgrades, and the $40,000 in reserve right now for the elevator.
Why can't I find it?
I'm looking at the new items, final new items.
I'm not sure it's worth getting hung up on now.
Here it is. Oh, my God.
I have a couple of questions on other topics.
Yeah, it was just about the 200,000, right?
Right.
After
And
all
it-
is
So
said and
this
done.
year,
And there was $250,000 of maintenance items included in the operating budget. So with
Right.
this year's view, we have about $250,000 of maintenance items included in the operating budget. So we have, oh wait,
Wait,
I'm in the wrong budget.
250?
Hold on.
117,000.
Hold on. Sorry. I'm looking at the wrong budget. Thank you. Yes, 117,000 between the two.
And
The
then
two schools.
115 in the maintenance trust.
Right. So that is, did I just say 250?
Yeah.
So that's $133,000 different. That's what you were looking for.
Thank you.
So I would say that $133,000 difference begins to offset something like a line that goes up by a million, it begins to chip away at, say, our increase in NHRS expenses, or the increase in health insurance, or the increase in special education. I mean, it's all those levers, right?
Well, no, because
So are you trying to say we should see the budget be $133,000 lower because we're not spending those maintenance items?
no, what I'm saying is that we spent that $130,000 at other places in the budget that don't include
Yes.
the retirement. So we have spent the money at other places in the new budget.
Yep.
So my point is, we ended up, you know, a flat budget, but it varies $150,000 increase, which is the way it is. It's just an observation that it's not a flat budget.
So does that impact the new guidance?
Impact what?
The new guidance?
I would say no.
Okay.
In my opinion. I mean, it's how a budget works. I could look at our 850 line budget and look at an area like regular education salaries that has a reduction going into,
Well, the only difference, Darlene, is we're pulling these out of the budget and bonding them.
no. So, I guess I'm not following you, Lauren. So I think what you're saying is if you were to take all of these items out and bond them and not do these maintenance items in this budget,
Well, you said there was a net 130 difference.
from last year to this year. But are you saying we should be not doing the $117,000 worth of items? And hold off on them?
No,
Okay, I don't know why I'm not
it's
following
making an
you.
observation, so we
Okay.
can move on.
All right, we're moving on.
It's not a flat budget is my point.
I think I understand his observation.
I think I've had a long day and I'm not following it.
Point taken.
Thank you, Lauren.
Point taken.
I'm gonna step in as a process observer. No, just kidding.
Okay, anyone else have any questions or?
I have a question. While watching the school board meeting last night, there was a point made that the $200 per student needs to be, a decision needed to be made to spend the money right away. Wasn't that what I thought I heard last night? And therefore, there is the $240,000 more or less that the district is going to receive among all the 1,200 students. Does that need to be spent this year, or can that be part
Oh,
of the
it
budget for
definitely
next
has
year?
to be spent this year, but probably what you heard, I didn't go to the meeting or
I
hear
thought I
it.
heard that they needed, according to the state mandate, they needed to make a decision to accept the money. And
Oh.
So
well,
last
They had to be
oh,
someone,
right.
I thought I heard that it needed to be earmarked for something to be done this year.
It does.
It
It
does.
has to be spent by December 30th
right.
on whatever things that we bought for PPE or for COVID.
Right.
But it has to be COVID related?
It has to be.
Yes, it has to be
Yes.
COVID-related.
That was the whole
And-
reason they gave us.
Right, and another stressful point in all of those machinations are that if you have expenses that exceed the money that you received from the state recently, then there is a process where you can apply for, whatever you're over. They have a $10 million stash there for schools to apply for additional funds, and that those also can only be applied to December 30th. So unfortunately, if you have hired personnel for the entire year, we can only use it through December 30th. But that money has to be requested via their application by December 1st, which I thought we were going to have a little bit more time. So that's a new crunch that we have.
So the implication is that may result in money if you spend it,
Mhm.
that there may be money available for something else at the end of the year.
Well, I think the way that this money works, it's from the Federal CARES Act, and it has an absolute deadline of 12/30. So I think
Right.
if we don't use it, the state has to give it back, is my
Yeah, I
is my
believe it goes
understanding.
back
But
to,
if you didn't have the money to begin with, you would have used some other fund to pay for whatever you need to buy,
for
right?
us, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we probably would have used the entire retained fund balance and the entire contingency fund, and maybe even then still had some issues, yeah.
So that has saved that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that will now belong to the taxpayers because we're getting this money. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's not going to wash out all of our COVID-related expenses because we will have expenses from January or December 31st through June 30th. We will, and there's no source after that.
Okay.
Right, unless there's some other,
Yeah, unless
Funding
something
that
else
becomes
happens
available
with
or-
a new administration or something, Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
okay, so just going back to FY '22, I appreciate that, Raul, but if we could hold on this year's items for the school board update, and we could just finish the budget discussion, that would be great. Okay, so, just to keep us on task here. So, the net result, were there any other questions on the items Kelly mentioned, or specific sections or categories in the budget? I did notice that, and I know there's a lot going on, I understand, but like there were like a couple of lines jumped out at me because I saw larger increases than I would have expected, and then I
Okay.
realized your new additions line hadn't been distributed. So for example, the nurses line looked like a big increase, but I think that's because the shared position is still in that new addition section of the FY '21 budget and hasn't been allocated back
Are you talking?
to the nurse sub line and things like that. So right now for FY '21, like there's 311,000 sitting in new additions for last year, for this current year.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
And then, I mean, like I said, nurses was the one that popped out at me, and I see that this shared sub-nurse line is not filled in, so I'm assuming that money is down in that 300.
Oh, you're looking at the budget trend file.
Yes, I'm looking
Yes.
at the budget trend
Oh,
file,
yeah,
sorry.
I probably did not even update that. I
So there are
apologize.
going to be some
Yes.
areas where the
Yes.
variances
Oh,
look greater
I'm so
than,
glad you mentioned that. I did not fix that, yeah.
they look a little greater than they kind of are in real life,
Yep,
so.
you're right.
I was typing the question to you going, and then I stopped myself and
No, I'm
realized
glad
that,
you
so.
said something because I would not have thought that I didn't, I would not remembered that I didn't do that.
Okay, so with the changes that Kelly talked about and the changes to the warrant, the additional articles, so while there was a, where did the number go? I think it was a 2.8% change in the operating budget. So if you were to look at the operating budget article compared to an adjusted operating budget article, would be a 2.8% increase. But because there are changes in other warrant articles, kind of after the operating budget, The net increase is a 2.4% increase from last year's budget. So we're at 24,882, 466 for this year, and the current view for round 3.1 has us, I just want to double check, I know it's right, it is, at 25,490, 460, so that's a 2.4% increase. That does not include CBAs. So that's where we stand right now, with the potential for some additional savings and modifications for round 4. So, and just a reminder, so that does eliminate any additional balance put into the special education expendable trust, as we discussed last month, and does reduce that the athletics by a little bit from usually it's about 67 to 50, and then the facilities maintenance last month had been at 200,000, and now it's at 115 for those two items that moved. So that's where we stand to date.
So do we have to take another vote to accept the new lower number?
No,
Okay.
no, we wait until, I would say, round 4, and say, I'm assuming that's going to be your final round?
I would hope, yeah.
And if we make that, I think last year we did finalize the budget in December.
I think we did.
And it looks like we're on track to do that again. So that gives us a little bit of time to work with the revenue estimates
Yes.
and work on what the tax impacts are, put the presentation together and things like that, and for the business office and superintendent to work through the CBAs. Okay, so if anyone has any other questions or anything, please send them to me. I can consolidate everything, send it to Kelly. If you're just looking and reviewing items and something jumps out at you or feel like you need another explanation. Where are we on the transportation? Are we in the second year?
Third, this will, FY '22 will be the third year.
Will be the third year, so 23 would be a new
If both parties choose to do that, yeah.
Okay.
They could go, because it's a 5-year contract.
Oh.
With an option to continue those last 2 years or renegotiate.
Okay. Okay. One of the other files I sent to everyone was the SAU budget file. There's a meeting tomorrow afternoon to talk about the budget. Nothing has changed. We're still using the 2%. I think the latest view has a 2% CPI adjustment with a 2.5% for the assistant superintendents and a $15,000 merit pool.
Right.
That results in a,
If you look on the very last page.
yeah,
there's-
page,
okay.
page 7, page 6, page 6.
Okay.
I'm seeing a 7.8% increase in the expenses, but without an anticipated use of fund balance, the amount that needs to be funded is a 9.5% increase. So it's 1.951 million as opposed to the 1.783, which is what needed to be funded last year.
And just a note, depending on how this budget is finalized, the co-op's portion could go up a little bit.
Yeah, so where there's a placeholder in there
There
now
is.
pending
Right.
this, okay. And again, the budget itself is driven mostly by the NHRS and 10.8% GMR estimate.
Yes.
There really were no even one-time items. You know, sometimes we as a committee, we talk about, oh, can, you not buy upgrade a computer or a fax machine or something like that, but there's really, and we had a couple of years where there was some additional professional development for one or two of the administrators. That's not in here this year. It does include the full year for the facilities director, which I think he might have been a little bit.
Yeah, he started in mid-August, so that looks like he's getting a much bigger raise, but
Right.
it's really just a timing issue.
Right, so, if anyone has any questions before 2 o'clock tomorrow, please let me know. Okay.
What's the facility director's salary?
For FY '22, it is,
I just closed the file, I think it's 66. Is that what he's making?
of course I can't find it, oh, here it is. For FY '22, it's 70,380.
Thank you.
And he replaced Mr. Gray?
No, Mr. Gray was the district supervisor in the high school, and this is an SAU employee.
Okay.
And he supervises all of the maintenance and custodial staff in all 3 districts.
Okay. So we just kind of reviewed the public hearing for CARES. And the other topic I wanted to cover was this town meeting calendar that Kelly shared with us at the start of the meeting. And Kelly does a really nice job of color coding us and leading us through exactly where we need to be per RSA. So based on this calendar, our public hearing would be Tuesday, February 2nd, with a snow date of Tuesday, February 3rd. And our school district meeting, we go first. Do we go
Right,
first?
every other year you trade with the Brookline Select, or the town of Brookline, their meeting, so.
Yay. So we go first on 3/2. With it's anticipated to be a 2-day meeting, assuming we're in a traditional format. I'm not sure how all of this will evolve over the next several months. So for right now, we're going to go with our traditional, setting our dates and doing everything the way we normally do.
And I'm not saying that that's going to be a 2-day meeting, that's just what we have started doing, so.
Right, right. And then Hollis is the week after for each of their public hearing and town meeting. Brookline is SB2, so their the Brookline School District is SB2, so their public hearing is for mid-January, and their deliberative session is Monday 2/1. And they just vote on Election Day on 3/9, on the ballot voting day. Any questions? Mark your calendars.
Deliberative session hopefully will only be 1 day, but it does have, it's a snow date, sorry.
It's a snow day,
Yeah,
yeah.
snow date. So the snow date for the deliberative session is the same as the date for the public hearing date for the co-op.
Mm-hmm.
Is that potentially an issue? Is there anybody who really needs to be at both of those?
We can probably work that out. I think that actually happened one other year, and we worked it out.
I think, yeah, with the administrators, we have
Yeah,
enough to be able to
we'll
manage it.
split
Yep.
our efforts, yeah.
All right.
Okay, great, thanks, Kelly, that's really helpful. Looking right now, moving to a school board update. Raul brought up a question prior to the meeting. It can evolve into, does it affect the FY '22 budget? So Cindy, I'm hoping you can share some information from last night's meeting about the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative. And I guess we'd be most interested in any financial impacts to the budget.
We haven't been told of any.
Okay, so
The
I,
committee just formed in October, and they've been meeting every other week. And one of the committee members gave a brief update last night, nothing financial was discussed.
okay, one of the, Andy just sent me a brief comment that he felt at this point, any professional development or items that might evolve at this point, he anticipates being covered by the budget that we are presented with. So he's not anticipating, but he wasn't more specific about actual costs related to.
He hasn't discussed any added cost to us. That was asked early on about it, but he didn't think that that would be. Originally, there was conversation about hiring a consultant.
Right.
And that was a big ticket item, but that no longer has been discussed.
Okay. So is everyone aware of what that initiative is? Okay, so I guess it was the June, July timeframe
Yeah.
as the reopening plans were being brought forward. The concept of, and Cindy, I don't know if I'm going to present this the right way. You're on the governing board. I think that's where it originated. I don't know if you want to give kind of.
You go ahead.
Okay.
That's where it was brought.
Okay,
in a
so
public hearing, or public meeting.
a resolution was brought up at the governing board meeting to address equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I guess the details of what that resolution stated would be in the minutes of your governing board meeting, but it was to just, I think, to ensure that all populations are equally and fairly represented, whether they're students, staff, just that the community is well represented and that the district is doing everything it can to ensure everyone is treated fairly. Is that a fair assessment?
And they came as in a public input to a governing board without the board knowing anything about it.
Okay,
And then it was taken to each individual board, and the resolution is in that packet, would be in that packet. Like the June board meeting packets is where we first saw the actual resolution.
okay. And then, so then each each school board took that back to determine what actions those districts might consider. And from those meetings, the concept of a committee came forward.
Well,
I don't know if that was introduced by the
yeah,
administration
in the
or.
July co-op meeting, I believe, I wasn't at that meeting. There was a large contingent that came. There were only really two topics. One was the reopening and one was this resolution that had been tossed out. And we had more people talk about the resolution than they did the reopening of the schools.
And that was true across each of the districts, because I actually watched the meetings for all three districts to hear the comments about the reopening plan, and that was pretty consistent in each district.
Yeah. So that's what started the whole thing. And then they came to each individual board, and Andy, discussed with the boards what they wanted to do. It was kind of put, not on the back burner, but knowing that reopening was the main thing that we needed administration and everyone to discuss. That was basically done for a couple of months, and now it's back on somebody's agenda and so they have been meeting, and they're, in last meeting, not this one, the last meeting that Andy spoke about this, he said that the committee's hope was to rework the resolution and bring it for approval to the boards.
Okay. So our concern here would be obviously if, as we're moving forward through with developing next year's budget, if there's any financial impact to any of the initiatives that might, like the increase in consulting, or whether, anything like that would be
Right.
covered by professional
And we've not had any
development.
discussions that would be an issue, so.
Okay.
So I have a question. Is that group meeting in public, in private? Can we find out who's a member of that group? Can we find out what their schedule is, their timeline?
I know I can tell you just from last night that they did say the schedule is every other Thursday. I assume that it's a public committee so that you can go. Honestly, I don't even know who's on the committee. I haven't seen an actual list. I mean, Andy has mentioned one or two people, but I haven't seen an actual list. So committees meetings are public, so I don't know why you wouldn't be able to.
So where do they meet?
I
don't
think
know if
it's a Zoom meeting.
Is it? I don't know.
Oh, it's a Zoom meeting?
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so Raul, I would probably ask Jackie.
Okay.
She would probably know.
She probably would,
Okay.
yeah.
And it might even be posted, they should be posted on the SAU website.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Jackie can certainly give you some information.
Yeah, I don't know who's running the meeting. I know Andy has attended it, but I don't know if it's a community member that's in charge of the meeting and the schedule. I'm not sure.
okay,
We really haven't been brought into it.
okay. There was a topic that came up right before the meeting with regard to the program of studies. So I know that the program of studies is reviewed annually.
It is.
And I think I was mentioning to Raul, the one thing I noticed that was different in the agenda packet is that typically the whole program of studies is in there with the strikeouts and the corrections.
That's
But this
usually
year,
not-
it was a summary of here's what we're changing.
Yeah, but the real program of studies we'll see in the December meeting.
Oh.
The areas that were highlighted in the board packet.
Yeah.
Were areas that they are considering changes.
Okay,
And as of last night, Mr. Barnes had requested that Holly ask for a couple of board members and maybe have, like kind of
a subcommittee.
a subcommittee so that they could discuss some stuff because we only have less than a month. So they asked that we, give our comments on what was in the packet, and they're gonna talk about it, and then in the December meeting, it'll come back. The program of studies had a lot of work done on it 2 years ago, when the one that you were just talking about. So their only highlighted changes that are in the board packet were the only things that we anticipate that may change. There was quite a bit of discussion because one of them was changing the science requirement from 3 to 2. As a board discussing it last night, that wasn't a high thought that we should do that, but I'm not sure what will be presented.
So then I would anticipate any staffing changes that result of a shift like that we would see in the budget
Yes.
going forward.
Yeah, the other budget thing would be the PE. That was one of the things that they
Oh, right.
asked about, whether we wanted to continue the way that they did it this year, where they didn't have one full-time and one half PE teacher, because the PE teacher, the half-time, wasn't there this year.
Yeah, we have a .7 that
Yeah.
we did not fill that position this year.
Right.
So there is discussion as to whether we
Right,
wanna-
because right now, the students can use their time on, like, practices with teams and things like that for credit, for that half credit,
Right,
right?
right.
So it's a 1.5 physical education requirement, and that extra half credit, they can, I don't know if it's limited to the school's teams, or it can be other activities that they do that
I'm
are
not
signed
sure.
off on,
I
but
believe
there's a
it was-
process
I
for,
believe it was a form that they had, like,
Yeah.
the kids went to dance and stuff, they had just had to talk to
Right.
Mr. Barnes.
Right.
And figure out whether it was
it would
enough
meet the
time. I mean, you didn't want
requirement.
somebody to say that they did one thing. and
Like
that
for
was
an
it.
hour a week, and
Yeah.
that's not, exactly, it had to meet all the requirements, and they had to fulfill a certain number of hours in a given time period, similar to a half year, so you'd have like the first 2 marking periods or the last 2 marking periods of the year to get all the hours in and things like that, so.
So if they indeed end up recommending that the required years of science is dropped from 3 to 2, that's going to be presented at the December meeting?
Yes. The
And-
discussion should be at the December meeting, that's what we were told last night.
Okay.
They're just gonna do some legwork before, they asked the board's opinion, and that was one of the ones that had more discussion than anything else.
And is there going to be any specific discussion on particular subjects that are going to be dropped and the ones that are going to be added, or?
I don't think there was anything specific that was being dropped. The possibility of not having the 1.5 credit for PE, the change if the requirement would be that we only required 2 sciences as opposed to the 3 that we require right now for graduation.
So the 3 that we require for graduation is greater than the state requirement,
Yes,
and is the state requirement 2?
yes, I believe it is.
Yeah, I think it is.
My sense in all of this is that if we want to remain a top school in the state, sometimes your requirements have to be higher. Your standards have to be higher than the average. And that's, and school to me is a challenge, not a place to be happy. I mean, we want to be happy here, but we also should be challenged. And so, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, kind of a thing. If that's been the standard for a while, we should keep it that way.
And it just came to me, the other discussion was around web design, because we put in a couple of years ago, and first time web design supposedly for coding and things like that, and now they're wanting to change it to cybersecurity. So that was a little bit of discussion as well last night.
They're both important.
Can our web design instructor do the cybersecurity?
That did not come up last night. Good question.
Probably not.
I don't know.
I don't know if you want it. And the other major news was that Mr. Barnes has resigned effective June 30th. So that will be
Wow.
new process that has to be started as well as everything else in 2020.
Wow, that is so surprising. Wow, okay. Okay, hadn't heard that.
See what you missed?
I should have tuned in for that one. Jeez. Okay, thanks, Cindy, I appreciate.
I guess obviously, both of the contracts are being negotiated. We've all had our first 3 meetings, and we're moving on.
Okay, good. Great. All right. We are steamrolling through our agenda this evening.
That's excellent.
We're all the way up to announcements. I'll give everybody one more shot at any questions with regard to any of the agenda topics from this evening, and then move on to announcements. Now, I'm assuming as much as we've enjoyed working with each other over these many years, we all don't want to see each other on Christmas Eve because we have other things planned. That would have been our fourth Thursday of the month, so we could back up to the third Thursday of December 17th.
However, that's the SAU Governing Board
That is
public
the
hearing.
SAU Governing Board public hearing, so Cindy won't be here. Okay.
That would have been a Thursday?
That's a Thursday.
And we do it on the Wednesday before?
That's the
day
school
before?
board meeting, right? They're meeting the 16th. We could push it to Monday, the 21st.
That works for me.
Okay.
I don't think
Monday.
a lot of us will be traveling.
That's true. That is true. All right, so we'll go with Monday.
Let's have a Christmas party too.
Yeah.
While we're at
We
it.
could do that too. Okay, well, great. We'll go with Monday, the 21st. Again, if anyone, as you're going through materials, have any questions, please send them to me, and I can get a list of information out to Kelly, and we can, resolve some issues or questions as they come up. Process observer.
We did great tonight. Lively discussion, very informative, and historic, given that the budget view, the latest round of the budget view was lower than the guidance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
And hopefully still going lower.
Thank you for the hard work.
Okay, at this point, I'll take a motion to adjourn at 7:39 PM
So moved.
from Brian,
Second?
seconded by Raul. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, look, it's unanimous.
1 hour and 9 minutes. Are you
700.
kidding me?
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.